Hi, I'm Ken Howard, and for over 33 years, I've been a specialist in therapy for gay men and coaching for gay men. And today, I want to talk about how trauma shows up in gay men's dating lives, maybe in kind of subtle ways. Now, what we mean by trauma is not just a big event like a car accident or being a survivor of abuse or surviving a natural disaster. Those things can certainly be traumas, but traumas can also be a lifetime of homophobia. It can be growing up over a long time in an abusive household. It can be having a history of relationships where there was some kind of a betrayal or dishonesty or even violence or some kind of weird oppressive behavior. Or it can also be things like surviving a bad car accident or a natural disaster, the bigger events. And some would say culturally, a lifetime of gay men and LGBT minority stress can also be a trauma. Now, how does this show up in our everyday lives or in dating? One of them can be what's called hypervigilance, kind of a fancy word for being on edge. Hyper meaning, elevated. Vigilance meaning like you're looking over your shoulder, like there's just a little bit of a paranoia, just being extra on guard for any sense of threat in your environment. So the way that might show up in dating would be always scanning for rejection. What did he mean by that? Is he going to break up with me after this date? Uh-oh, what if I said the wrong thing? It's a lot of self-awareness and an anxiety about dating, just waiting for the other shoe to drop. That kind of hypervigilance could be, not always, but it could be a sign that you're a survivor of some kind of trauma, and that's the way it's showing up in your dating. It could be not letting anybody get close. If you're a survivor of trauma, your psychological defenses are activated, and so you might be more reluctant to let somebody get close because closeness equals danger. If you were mistreated or abused by, say, a parent or a former partner or a boss or a teacher or a coach, those are all kind of authority figures. And so any kind of a closeness or a proximity to you that then became toxic can make the idea of being close also toxic. And you might be unconsciously resisting closeness because part of your defenses are trying to keep you from that toxicity that came with that original person being close. Another way it might show up is avoidance. You're not letting yourself you're not letting yourself be happy in a dating experience or even in a relationship, because on some level you feel like you're damaged goods, and you feel like damaged goods doesn't deserve a good guy, so you're not going to let a good guy into your life. It could show up as ghosting somebody. You just kind of bolt all of a sudden in part of the dating process. You stop returning text messages, you stop returning calls, you avoid going out with them, or you just kind of ghost, because on some level you're keeping that avoidance of closeness. You might self-sabotage. Again, if your self-esteem is low, particularly as a result of trauma or being mistreated, then you might sabotage, deliberately say antagonistic things or be insulting or be unavailable. You might do something to sabotage because on some level your self-concept is saying, I don't deserve to have a boyfriend or a partner. I'm not good enough because I've been damaged by this experience, particularly if it was an interpersonal trauma where somebody did something to you. And yet you have to remember, put the blame where it belongs, in the perpetrator's lap. You're not damaged or unworthy because somebody did something to you. The responsibility for them doing something to you, whether it's an abuser or a criminal or a bad boss or a bad coach or even a bad parent, sometimes even an abusive sibling, that's on them. And you have to put the blame where it belongs in trauma. It can certainly show up in, the popular discussion these days about attachment patterns. Those can be beaten a little too much, but trauma can show up as an anxious attachment, being clingy, or fearing abandonment, or also being avoidant, again, pushing people away. That can be seen as an attachment problem that's related to being a trauma survivor. It can show up in terms of body image and shame. Again, if you were traumatized by someone or something, particularly someone, that can be taken internally a little too deeply into shame about your character or shame about your body, and just feeling, not good enough. It can show up around self-criticism. Also, I think shame can show up post-trauma in terms of status, keeping yourself small, not letting your dreams and ambitions thrive, because again, on some level, you feel like you don't deserve to be one of the people whose dreams come true, or whose status is elevating over time, like with promotions at work, or becoming more impactful in your chosen profession. Choosing partners who repeat unhealthy dynamics, like you got involved with a guy who had a substance abuse problem, and then maybe that fell apart, and then later down the line you fall for another guy who has a substance abuse problem. That kind of pattern might be an expression of, again, the old wounds where you're doing something that shrinks like to call the repetition compulsion, where something was done to you and yet ironically you seek it out again for some reason. Because I think on some level, this is probably very unconscious, your mind is trying to make sense of what happened to you. So it almost wants to recreate the scene of the crime so that this time you can master it. And repetition compulsion is a thing in trauma, particularly in things like certain kinds of abuse. What is the hope and the healing? It's not all gloom and doom. Remember that, trauma is not your character. Trauma is not what you're made of. Trauma is something that you went through, and the after effects of trauma can be something that you kind of live with. So you can work through this, just because you're a trauma survivor, or maybe even we could say a trauma victim, that doesn't mean that that has to define you forever. That means that you went through it at one time, but you can grow through it and you can heal. And healing comes with time, therapy, some forms of coaching, social support, working on your self-esteem, working on your self-concept, cognitive therapy to understand what your self-statements are. How do you see you? How would you describe you? These are some of the things that help people get through trauma. And it's also kind of understanding that, yes, there are bad people in the world. There are very, very disturbed people, and they hurt other people. And if you've encountered one or more of them, I'm sorry, but the world does have some of those. But I think on the balance, there are many more people who are not disturbed, who are not bad partners, and are not bad bosses, and they're not bad people. I think overall, the number of good people in the world outweighs the number of bad people. It's just the number of bad people who commit crimes and mistreat people, they have more publicity, or they stand out more. Healing happens when you recognize the patterns of what you're doing. You ask yourself, am I having some kind of a pattern in my thinking or my behavior? Am I consistently putting myself down? Am I consistently acting like somebody who doesn't love and appreciate themselves very much? If that's going on over and over and over again, not good things happen. But if you have something much more affirmational, like I love myself, I respect myself, I am deserving of good things, not more than other people. That's not narcissism, not I'm better than everyone else, so everybody has to bow down to me. We all know people like that. It's not that it's more than everybody else, but it's as much as everybody else. You have as much right to your dreams coming true as anyone else. There's nothing wrong with you that your dreams can't come true, even if you've been through just pure hell of a traumatic experience. Having, I think, affirmative therapy and coaching, I think too often people go through something, and I had some content recently about non-affirming therapists. They say they're supportive, but then they turn around and they have homophobic things that kind of leak into the work because they're not really affirming. They just want our business. There's a big difference between a truly gay affirmative therapist or a gay affirmative coach and somebody that just says, oh, I see everybody, I love everybody equally. And meanwhile, they're harboring the isms, heterosexism, racism, whatever it is, ageism, whatever it is. I always like to say I invite reflection. Think about it. Think about how some of your past experiences might be influencing your future. Just say that to yourself. How do my past experiences affect who I am now? Sometimes it can be good things. If you had good parents and good teachers and good coaches, maybe good clergy, good scoutmasters, just anybody who was a good mentor, maybe you have strength and you have confidence and you have skills, and that really serves you. But if you had negative influences of people who were disturbed themselves, or they hadn't worked out their own stuff and they acted it out on you, you have to wonder, did you bring that with you? Did their neurosis kind of rub off on you and then you made it your own and you carry it through life like it's some kind of a backpack? You don't want to do that. You want to assess and evaluate the influences that you've had. The bad experiences maybe taught you humility, or maybe taught you how to cope with vulnerability, or how to have strength and resilience despite bad things that happen to you. And then the good and fun, affirmative things that have happened to you give you the strength and confidence and spring in your step. And of course, bringing it back to dating, it helps you to feel like you're a good guy, you're a fun guy, you're worthy of dating another good and decent and fun guy. There's nothing stopping you from having a good guy in your life. If you found this helpful, the usual spiel, like, subscribe, share, and maybe comment some of your own experiences to the extent, you're comfortable in a public forum like comments. And think about how some of your past experiences, especially past trauma, affects your dating life today. And maybe we'll do one on how it affects your work life as well. So if you'd like customized help, if you're in California, where I'm licensed to practice therapy, you're gonna have therapy. Think about that. We do it on Zoom, just like this, cameras. Or coaching anywhere in the world. I work with guys in time zones all over the world. We just kind of do the math about what time zone you're in, if you're in Europe or Asia or wherever. And that coincides with the hours that I'm in my home office in West Hollywood, California. I hope this has been helpful, and leave your traumas behind and date with confidence, because you deserve to have that happiness.